Welcome back, guys, to another episode of The Money Honey, the show that brings together women in finance, construction, and property. Now, I say that brings together women in finance, construction, and property. I have my very first male guest on the show today, and I specifically chose this particular person to be my first male guest for a few different reasons, but as I've always said, if you've watched any of the other episodes in the past, I have mentioned in the past that this show wasn't going to be just women in the show and no men allowed. It's not a girls' club, okay? What it is, just to explain it, is a show that brings more female faces to the screen. So a safe place for women to come and practice being on the screen, speaking on, podcasts, and just sharing their story because let's face it, I know that, in these kind of industries like construction, property, and finance, there's more men that speak up than women. So I'm simply creating a safe space for more women to speak up. But we can't have the conversation alone, right? We can't just be here talking amongst ourselves, right? We've got to bring all genders, all backgrounds, everybody to the conversation so that we can all thrive together. And my guest today on the show is Craig Skelton. You would have seen him on LinkedIn for sure, doing his very own podcast that I've been a guest on 3 times now, by the way. So I'm not just repaying the favor and putting him in the hot seat this time, but I really got to know Craig and his business model and actually discovered. So the reason I've invited Craig is because most people think that these high-flying big corporate businesses in financial services must be all led by men and it just must be a big man's club. But I found the opposite was true in Craig's business, but I'll let him tell the story. Hi, Craig.
Roz, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. I'm doing really well. And I'm really happy to see you on the screen again. But this time I'm interviewing you.
I know. You've got the tough job. You know how tough the gig is when you're interviewing rather than being the guest. So
Do you think, yeah? You find
I
it?
definitely think being the host is far tougher than being a guest. Absolutely all day long.
Well, I just treat it as a chat. I mean, all day I chat all day long, but most of the time I'm chatting to clients and they obviously want me to deliver a job. But this, I just see it as just chatting to sideline colleagues, industry colleagues, friends, and most of the time strangers, because that is the tough bit when you don't know someone at all. I've known you now for quite some time. But actually, for those who don't know you, why don't you give us your intro? What do you do and who are you?
Yeah, so my name is Craig Skelton, as you kindly introduced right there, and I feel as though I'm sort of bigged up now, so I've got to give that big intro a bit of a weight, shall we say. So, yeah, my name's Craig Skelton. I've been in financial services sort of 20-something years, corporate, worked in a banking for a little while, banking, sort of retail banking kind of thing, financial services, moved into a estate agency, again, large corporate, managed teams in large corporate estate agency, mortgage services. And then 6 years ago, realized I needed freedom. That was a big word for me, and wanted freedom and set up CS Mortgage Solutions. Funnily enough, when I look back and before the podcast, think about this, when I set CS Mortgage Solutions up, which is it is relevant to what we're going to talk about, is that I set that up with 3 female colleagues who mortgage brokers in estate agencies. So there was me and 3 of my female colleagues. So I set up CS Mortgage Solutions, and that was 6 years ago. Grown that now to sort of 20-something advisors, financial advisors. We've got estate planning, equity release as well. We've got people that also have their own brand and trading style within CS Financial Group that help and support them build their own brand, trading style and business within that. And then I also coach mortgage brokers as well. So people that aren't within CS Financial Group who maybe with different networks, different setups, directly authorized, sole traders. I coach them from a business point of view, from a business point of view, being a mortgage broker and mindset and the rest of it as well. So yeah, think that was me in about 30 something seconds, I think, to be fair.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, today's all about you. I'd rather you do all the talking than myself, but I'm just here to direct and guide the conversation on the subject of women in finance, because that's the reason you are my first male guest on the show, why I've invited you on the show, because contrary to popular belief where people think, oh, men and men just set up businesses together and it's like a boys club. Actually, you started your business with 3 female directors. And actually, when you were talking to me about this offline, you said that 60% of your workforce or your brokerage, your brokerages are actually female.
Yep.
So that is the opposite to the statistics that we often hear on the show. And that's the reason I want to bring Craig on the show, because I want the female listeners to be surrounded by, and it shouldn't be pockets. I appreciate that. It shouldn't be pockets of the industry where female women are thriving, right? It should be across the board. I know that. I appreciate that. But we have to see it to believe it. We have to touch it to embrace it. So tell us, Craig, why has that come about the way it has? Has that been strategic? Has that been an accident? And what's it like, women in finance from your world?
I think the thing was when you look back and reflect on the situation, I think because first starting out when I left school quite some years ago, I went into the travel industry, and the travel industry was very female dominant at that time. Probably still is now, to be fair, but it was quite a female dominant. So when you're sort of 16, 17 and sort of seeing that your regional manager were females, I think that's just and you just see them as human beings and people, and they're your bosses. It's then you don't differentiate from that sort of stigmata that it's like, well, every boss is a male and every sort of regional manager and manager. So I think when I look back, I think it was then from really the start of my working life that it's just been a situation where I've worked with males and females. I've never been I was in the travel industry for quite a few years and worked in retail, then went into sort of call center environment, very mixed kind of people, again, male, female. And I've never actually ever worked in a male dominated environment. So I think back when I left travel and went into financial services and going into a retail bank, again, that was my boss was a manager, to be fair. And I've got a lot of time for him because he was the person that gave me a break in financial services and got a lot to thank him for. But for the most part of it, it was a very, again, female orientated environment in retail banking. So, and again, some of the regional managers in banking were female. So I think it's just, I think because that's sort of the environment you start with, it's just then natural that, well, this is how it is. You don't sort of, and in fairness, it's not until you put into the opposite situation. So I think particularly when I first started with Open Work, and Open Work's a network that CS Mortgage Solutions is still part of and was part of from the start, is that when I worked in estate agency mortgage services, that was, again, quite male-led until then. So I used to inherit teams, and I'll talk a little bit about that in terms of the change of that. But it wasn't until I went into Open Work and the network, and then went to principal events and networking events, and they actually then thinking, this is quite a male. I've gone from retail banking, gone from travel agent kind of industry to retail banking to then estate agency mortgage services, and then moving into the sort of having my own business within the network, within Open Work. And then it wasn't until then that I thought, actually, this is quite a male dominated environment from a principle of business point of view. And that was obviously 6 years ago, and things have sort of changed so much, but that was very alien to me. And because it was alien to me, I noted you're very aware of the situation. So I think, wow, because I'm quite a person that will, what I'm like, Ross, I will come across as laid back, and I take stock of my surroundings and really understand the situation that I'm in. And I was sat in this room with a lot of people thinking, this is a very male orientated environment. Principals of firms are, and don't get me wrong, there was some, and there's still some amazing principal owners within, particularly within open work. But it was just that realization, then thinking, wow, this is quite a cultural shift from my own point of view. Thinking, is this like the norm? And like, because as you know, like my wife's a financial advisor within open work as well, different firm, different setup. But again, it was just quite alien for that, of that culture shock of, wow, is this what the world of financial advising business owner is like at that point, which was, like I say, which wasn't the setup of my firm, and it certainly wasn't something that I was used to.
Right, so that's interesting. So your background is actually very female led, right? Of just a lot of inclusion across both genders. But then coming into financial services, you definitely noticed that male shift, or that male kind of presence there over the women. So how did you then end up building a business where you've shifted those metrics from, it being a room full of men to having 60% of the women make up your firm?
I think the thing is, it's about people, isn't it? It's about the people that you want to work with day in, day out. And that doesn't really matter. It's all about the values that are being aligned. So that doesn't really matter what sexuality, what race, what color. It's just totally irrelevant. It's about surrounding yourself by people that you want to work with and you feel that you've got a connection with. So I know that, like, going back to when I worked with the estate agency mortgage services, when I sort of went first into that kind of environment, and I inherited a team. I can remember inheriting a team in that large corporate world, and it was very male orientated environment. And again, it was very much but I think because of estate agency is female led, and that's, sorry, not female led, but it's that you've still got very much inclusion. It's very much a 50-50 kind of thing with the estate agency, and it's male female orientated world. You've got half the regional managers were female, half male. So again, so when I went into inherited a team and sat down with that team, I saw it as like, wow, this is very male orientated environment, and it's a very different, it's a culture shift. But at the same time, it was, I like that sort of old boys club kind of situation, really. Like, it's like, even now it's like, oh my God, like, wow, I hate that kind of thing. It's just, it's like that boys club kind of scenario and situation. Just, it's not the kind of person that I am, and the kind of person that and the way that I've sort of been brought up, not only from a young point of view, but then just throughout my work career. So I think when I look back and then think that, and I changed that culture, like within the team that I inherited, that quickly changed, and it was about getting the right people involved. If that ended up being all males, that it was, I wasn't seeing it from that point of view. It was having those people that are well organized, driven, motivated. I wasn't thinking, and I can remember some conversations I had, why do you want to take that person on? Because the chances are they're going to have a baby in the next 5 years. And it's like, wow, how can you even recruit somebody or dismiss somebody for a role thinking about what's going to happen in 5 years' time? It's like, well, that is irrelevant. I'm worried about now. For me, it's about that person now. And if that's something they choose to do in 5 years' time, then that's fine. That's their life, and that's something that they choose to do, the same as the things I choose to do in my life, kind of thing. But I think it was, and especially when I set up the firm, it was looking at, I wasn't sort of pigeonhole people thinking that it's an all female. Like, it's only until now you think back thinking, actually, well, there was me, and there was Siobhan, who came on as a mortgage broker, and there was Eve, and there was Lisa. Those people that, it was just that they were the top performers in my team back when I was in the corporate world. And I left, they wanted to come along for the ride. They sort of decided they wanted to be part of this journey. They just happened to be female, but they shared my values. They trusted me. They knew that the firm would be the right culture and the right setup for them, because that's what I had created back in my employed corporate world, shall we say.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why we're having this conversation here, Craig, because you're in your head, you're in this space of you don't even see it. You just see merit, you see, you give credit where it's due, you are building a culture. You just, it maybe just didn't occur to you that that's what you were doing over the time. And then when you entered a world that was predominantly male dominated, then you realize actually not everyone operates like this. And so I think that's why we need to bring awareness to different styles of leadership, different styles of cultures and management styles within businesses, because that is not the norm. I feel like you're not the norm, like the way you think, the way your culture, your attitude, it is becoming that way. There's definitely that shift. I've always had male bosses, and I can't really single any one of them out for any negative reasons. Like I've built my career. I don't feel like they held me back. They in fact, my latest male boss put me forward for an award, so it was, I've never had that kind of like a man is holding me back type of attitude.
Right.
Me personally, but people do, and people have had that kind of experience. And I don't want to bring on the show, this attitude of, oh, everything is great and everything is fine, and this stuff doesn't happen. Look, everyone is living a happy life in perfect gender harmony, but that's not the case. And we haven't even touched, ethnic minorities, and even the LGBTQ plus community. Like, we haven't even gone there yet, right? We're still trying to get the man and woman thing right. Like, we're still trying to get the Adam and Eve days right, let alone like going towards, the future of, non-binary and being gender neutral. Like, that's coming, right?
Yeah,
You
definitely.
can see that coming.
You can, but I think that like something like you sort of touched on there, Ros, was about like when I sort of said there about when I first walked into that room with Open Work 6 years ago. I can sort of look at that now and see how much has changed within that network, because there are so like they are working really hard. And this is like you say, my experience with this particular network, and I'm sure that there are plenty of other networks and people's experiences out there, but I sort of see that shift within networks now, that you can sort of see actually there are business owners out there, there are principals within Open Work, and there is a massive, I think the old, shall we say, the old guard, is that right? I don't know how politically correct I can be with this, but the old guard, shall we say, are moving on. They're moving away from the industry because they can't cope with social media. They can't cope with various other things as well of the world that is changing. And it is great to sort of see that the world is changing that from that point of view, and the networks are changing to, like I said to you, I'm part of the sort of inclusion action group within Open Work, so which we don't want to get to talk about today, but that's like a big thing within Open Work as a network, that they're wanting to sort of see that there is an inclusion workplace and the inclusive workplace within the network as well. So there are more principals in female principals within the network now. I'm certainly seeing that, and there's more financial advisors. The financial advisor population is ever growing with females, so which is a great thing, because it's good to see that old guard and that thing is changing for the better, really, because it's not, you should be judged on ability, you should be judged on your values, you should be judged on who you are and what you're wanting to achieve, not judged on other things, which is, it's like you say, it's just very alien to me. It's not the norm. So when it sticks out, when I sort of see things like that, it's like, well, wow, how, like, it's a very different way of thinking, shall we say.
I'm going to ask a question that might have an answer to it, or it might be quite punchy, but I wanted to know, have you ever had to call out a situation where you're not inappropriate, but someone else has been inappropriate, and you've caught it out, like you've called it out, that you've seen that they've said something inappropriate towards a woman or done something? Like, have you ever been in that situation at all? And you don't have to be specific, but can you share anything about that?
Yeah, I can sort of recall several situations. I think I'll be very general if I can, just in terms, like you say, I'm
I
going
don't
to
want
be
to know
very
that it's
general.
not that gossip,
Yeah.
but this is about,
No, it's not. But
yeah.
it's just very general. So, at an event and at a with other principals, mortgage brokers, financial advisors. It was very much quite a big event, and I sort of an advisor who was in my firm stood at the side of me at this event. We were talking, it was just me and them. Another sort of firm owner, shall we say, came to me. We ended sort of having a conversation. They were talk to me. You could see they were having even though the person that was just sort of the side of me could have could have interacted with the conversation, could have given quite a far better account actually than I could have had far more input than I could have in that conversation. But it was just very directed at me. And then at the end of that person sort of turned around to me, and sort of said, you might want to make some notes on that and the shock, like horror for me was sort of, wow, you actually think, and that it was quite clearly at that point, they sort of said, well, is this not your PA? I'm like, wow, that is your assumption just because a female is to the side of me, the way I'm talking, and we're at this event together because we want to be at this event, and that realization to think, wow, that is actually and the thing is like you can't. That's their norm. That is their norm, Ros. That's the thing.
Yeah,
and so
it happens. Honestly, it's everywhere. That happens all the time.
And it does. And I think that sort of, there's not loads of instances like that. I have had that on a couple of occasions, but I think that it's about education, isn't it? I think that's the thing with something like that. And it's okay I'm quite comfortable pointing that, not pointing out, that's quite a strong word, but I'm quite comfortable having that conversation with that person. I'm trying to educate them, whether I educate them or not, or change their views or their habits, or anything like that. I can't control that. I've sort of said that plenty of times before, but I will have my opinion and sort of say, and it was very clear. I'm very polite. The female that I was with was very polite, but it's about sort of, and that's the sort of thing with it. It's about, well, that is your opinion and that's just your assumption. I need to try and educate your assumption to actually, this is the top advisor in my firm and we've got a great relationship. They're a great individual. And actually, if you'd had addressed that individual more in that conversation, you would have learned a lot more just in terms of the topic that was talking about than actually I could have ever inputted into that conversation kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think,
it
is
thinking about that chance, did he? He just assumed, and you called it out, and you don't call it out because I know what you're saying. It's not because you want to change that one person, because you physically won't be able to change everybody, and there's some people you just can't change. But it's more the respect for your colleague. That's why calling things out, whether you're a female or a man listening to this show right now, or however you identify, it's just when you see something that you just does not sit right with you, and you let it go, you've almost kind of become an accomplice to it, haven't you? You're part
and some
of
people
that.
won't. And some people won't challenge that, Ros. That's the thing. Some people will not challenge it. Like I said, it's not another strong word, but it's just calling out. It's like I said, some people will just let it go. Some people would just let it go and think, do you know what? I'm not comfortable with conflict, and it's not conflict. It's just a conversation. Like if there is their assumption and you are going back on their assumption, that's not conflict. You're just having a conversation based on what their assumptions are, the same as my assumptions in terms of the culture of me and my firm and my values kind of thing. So
100%, I agree. I think it's great that there are people like yourself that call it out. Some people do suffer in silence, and they don't even give the person next to them a chance to call it out because maybe they just didn't make them aware. And actually that we have to take responsibility of that, whether you're man, woman, whoever you are. You need to call something out yourself. If you were uncomfortable with a situation and you were in a I know it's a difficult conversation to be had, and I've been in a situation for sure when I've been at an event and someone's made a comment and I told no one about it. I kept it to myself because I thought, oh yeah, well now if I tell my boss, then he's going to kick up a fuss, and then they're going to know that I told on them, and then I'm going to come across like that girl that just couldn't take a joke, because that's really what we're afraid of, right? It's like that girl that she just couldn't take a joke, or you know, in the news they still do it to this day when you hear about really horrible incidences and they say keep your girls at home, or she shouldn't have gone out dressed like that, and you're like, what? Like how is that the lesson today?
Yeah,
How did we
exactly.
take that lesson from today? So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's important that what I'm getting from this episode, if you're listening, is that you can't just assume that everyone in the room knows what's going on. If you need to call something out, call it out, even if it's a private, confidential chat. You know, it doesn't have to be public. But also, if you've just witnessed something and you can't publicly do anything about it, I think you need to bring it to someone who can, because it's not going to be addressed if no one knows about it. So definitely raise it, call it if you see it, raise it if you can't do anything and you don't personally want to deal with that situation. You might have to, you know, get some help. So I think, you know, help is there. You just need to, put your hand up.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
And the final question I wanted to address is, with such a female dominated space that you're in now, right? How does the concept of women empowering women crop up do you see that, or do you actually, you know, because some people have very different opinions of what women empowering women. Some may say that that's their worst nightmare, to be in a female-led business, because it can be quite catty. Others would say, oh yeah, I want to be surrounded by more women because they're empowering. Is there a culture now that's gone into women empowering women, or does that not really play out?
To be fair, for me, it doesn't really play out because, and using your words, because I think that's because for me, it's about the right people, working with the right people, working with, like I've said before, it's the right people have their roles within the business, but because that it's about the values, it's about who they are, it's about the motivation, it's about actually what's inside them that's more important than anything else. So, and that's the thing with it. It's more about the individual than this, like I said, than the women empowering women kind of thing. It's not really. It's like the cultures, particularly within my firm, is just not. It's just we're all in this together. Everybody helps each other out. Like our compliance and risk manager is female, so she sort of has certainly control over 20 advisors that she's responsible for from a compliance and risk point of view. So it's just and all the males in the business respect that because she's in that role. She's the right person for that role, and it's not about like anything else. It's about having the right people who's doing the right job. Doesn't matter who they are, what color they are, what race they are, male, female, or anything like that. It's just about having the right people in the roles who share the values and having that culture that's just the norm. And that for me is like
Yeah,
everything's
no,
just like the
I get
norm.
it. Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's nice that someone is so aligned with their values and their culture that it breathes and it breeds across the whole team. And that's exactly what culture is, right? You know, it comes from the top down, and I can see that. How would you sum up in 2, 3, or 4 words what your values are? Like, what are these values that you keep living by? How did you come to summarize them?
The three values, 3 words. It's trust, honesty, integrity. They're my values, and everything is aligned with that with the business. Everything's aligned with that with my coaching. Everything's aligned with that with the business owners that I work with. It's all about that because life's difficult enough. There is enough lies, deceit, and the rest of it in the world. So being a mortgage broker is tough enough. Being a business owner is tough. You don't need to create more friction by not having trust, not having honesty, and not having integrity. So I think it has to be that, because then if you've got those values and you live by those, and stick to those and die by those, then it just makes things easier. And everybody wants an easier life. And being a mortgage broker is tough. Being a business owner is tough. Doing what you do is tough. But if you've got trust, honesty, and integrity with yourself and your team and the people that you work with, it just makes things a little bit easier.
I love that. I've got can I show you my values?
Yeah, no, please do. Absolutely.
So I'm just picking something from my office here. So I bought this, right? I bought this little, I don't know, what do you call it? Like a little ornament for my office. And there are so many lovely words out there that you could pick for your values. And I picked this one. I guess because it had the bees, obviously. So I obviously picked it for that reason.
That helps.
And yeah, that helps for the branding. And it says, be good, be happy, be kind. And I thought, yeah, so I have that on my desk next to me. Obviously, I've got so many other values like being authentic and being brave and all that kind of stuff. But I thought, yeah, like be good, like just be good in your job, in everything you try and do, in your delivery, in your service, just being good. And obviously, that sometimes is enough. Like it's not about being the best. It's not about being like better than everyone else. It's just being good. It's like sometimes being good is underestimated.
Yeah.
Like really massively underestimated. And then obviously happy, kind, like being happy with what you have and where you're going, being kind to the people that are around you. It's just basic values, basic principles that are underestimated, I think. Like you said, trust, honesty. Where has that gone? Like sometimes you don't, where did that go? Like honesty in itself is such again, an underrated value, because sometimes if you're trying to get lost in the being great, you sometimes may have to forfeit your honesty because you try and be too great that you just want to look great and not be honest. So it's hard to pick your values, isn't it? Because actually one value could end up losing another.
Absolutely. I think it's just being true to yourself, isn't it? I think the thing is, it's thinking about like your values for you that they're about being good, being happy, and being kind. If you know that you're being good, if you know that you're being kind and you're happy, then that's okay. You're true to yourself. You're not worried about what anybody else is thinking, saying, doing, however that is. It's just, well, I know that they're my values. I know that I'm following that day in, day out, and I'm quite comfortable in my own space by doing that. I know that I'm honest with everybody. I trust people until they give me a reason not to trust them.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is sort of that, and I'm integrity with it. So it's just about I think it's just about being comfortable with what you're doing, what you're achieving, and absolutely appreciate just appreciate that.
Yeah.
Like the thing is, like we are sat here on your podcast. It's your podcast that you've achieved, that you've set up, you've created and built. We've connected on LinkedIn and had connections. Just be grateful for that. That's an awesome thing to then think, actually, so this whole thing coming about is amazing. So you've got to be grateful for things like that as well. And be comfortable
honestly,
with what you do.
Yeah, I think I don't know how many listeners are tuning in right now, okay? But it doesn't matter, because for the last half hour, all I've been focused on is just you and me. And I actually create a lot of content so that I can watch it back. I know that sounds really vain, but it's not about being vain at all. It's like I enjoy my own content. I genuinely am like going back through my Instagram, like, oh, that was a great day, or like going back through my stories, and I enjoy what I'm doing. So I create this content just as a journey to document. And you know what? If when I'm gone, one person says, oh, I miss the Money Honey show, or I remember when I used to watch that, or this, did you know that Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, whatever you want to call him, Van Gogh, is it? Van Gogh died thinking his art was a failure.
Yeah.
I just thought, oh, that every morning I remind myself of that. I'm like, this man, not only did he chop his ear off and God knows how much time he spent like painting, but he actually thought he died with it not going to any good use. And now his museum in Amsterdam is the most visited museum across the whole world. So yeah, like that's scary, Craig, to think just the impact you're making whilst you're here, but also what it could make when you're gone. Like, it's just,
the
yeah,
legacy the legacy that you're creating. The question I
yeah.
would ask, and the controversial one is, did Van Gogh or Van Gogh, did he see it as a failure? Obviously, he became well known and actually blew up when he was no longer here. But actually, at the time himself, did he appreciate what he'd achieved and appreciate done? And that, because I think the failure thing is something that we've labelled on because we saw
Oh,
it.
maybe.
The
Yeah.
failure is that maybe that is the what his paintings are worth, what is, do you know what I mean? It's like we sort of see that as, and we labeled it as failure. I don't know. I'm just
That's
thinking
a
that
really good point.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know the answer to I don't know whether that is true or not. But
Yeah.
he might not have seen it as failure. He might have thought, you know what, I've created some absolute, and I've loved doing what I'm doing, and I've enjoyed my life and enjoyed doing what I'm doing and what I've created. Whether
Yeah.
people accepted it or liked it or bought it or appreciated it, I don't really care because I actually feel as I've achieved something myself. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Do you know what? I hope he did. I hope he died satisfied. I hope he was like, that was a really good vase. You know, I hope he painted that fruit and was like, that was great. You know, I enjoyed that. I hope he
Exactly.
did. But
Yeah,
like
exactly.
humans, I can only imagine that if humans then are like you, maybe not as I don't know. Look, this is a very philosophical question for the listeners to contemplate. Why not drop it in the chat box, in the message, below, whether you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, or if you catch us on LinkedIn and Instagram. What did you think? Do you think Van Gogh died happy, thinking, you know what, I did some good paintings, I had a good life? Or do you think he died thinking, what was all that for? Like, no one bought anything, I didn't even make it. Who knows? But would love to know what you guys are thinking out there. I really liked this conversation. Craig, where can people find you whilst you're still here on this earth, blessing us with all your talent? Where can we find your work?
LinkedIn is my most, where I post every day. I'm on Instagram, so I've got my own website, craigskelton.co.uk is up there as well. So generally people will be able to find me in terms of on some social media anyway, if they're not
Oh,
bored of me
yes.
already.
Yeah, you're definitely. Yeah, well, I'll put it in the show notes. The link to your LinkedIn profile and your podcast. So I'm happy to share that with the listeners. And if you are listening again, please don't forget to give Craig a thumbs up. Whether on YouTube or Spotify, show him the appreciation if this podcast was a good episode for you, and share it with anyone else that you think maybe he's leading a team, managing a team, or you're in a male or female dominated team and you want to follow a bit more of Craig's passion, culture. But actually, a very big takeaway from this is get your values straight. Get your values straight. Make sure that, from what I've taken from this episode, the biggest lesson is make sure you have a plaque. That's it. That's the word.
Yeah, plaque. Yeah, that's
Yes,
it.
yes. Make sure you have a plaque on your wall, in your head, tattooed on your arm, wherever you want it. But the values, the core values, you have to start there, and then the rest will fall into place.
Definitely.
Thanks again, Craig. It was amazing chatting to you now and being your interviewer. But yeah, I will see you soon.
Thanks very much. Thanks for letting me come onto the podcast and being the first male on here. So I appreciate
Yes,
that.
you can have that badge. You have shown the way, and I hope many men listening to this, or females who want to encourage more of the men around them to speak up and to share what they're doing in this industry for a better co-working environment. Yeah, please, I want to hear from you. Thank you.